Hello, everyone, and welcome to another session from the WITS Tutoring team. My name is Shamar, and today I'll be going through the Cape Tourism Unit 1, Paper 2 for 2015, and we'll just be going through some questions and seeing all the possible responses that you could give for these questions, right? If you remember the last time I made a video, we spoke about how to go about answering essay type questions. We spoke about the use of examples. We spoke about formulating your points. We spoke about how to answer the questions to maximize your marks in the exam. So let's try and apply what we learned here for the questions that they can be applied to. The first question says, list 3 classifications of tourists. Now, I know that it said 3 classifications, but for the purpose of your education, I just gave you 5 classifications. So you can use any 3 of these. You have inbound tourists, that's a tourist that comes into the country. You have outbound tourists, that is the type of tourist that leaves the country. So if I leave Jamaica and go to America, to Jamaicans, to the country of Jamaica, I will be considered an outbound tourist, right? You have domestic tourists, that is, a tourist that travels to different areas within his or her own country. You have regional tourists, that is the type of tourist that travels within the region. So from Jamaica to Barbados, or from Barbados to Trinidad and Tobago. And then you have international tourists, persons who travel outside of their region, persons who travel internationally. So if someone leaves Germany to come to Jamaica, that is an international tourist, right? So you can use any of these 3 classifications of tourists. B says, explain 2 components of the tourism system, right? Now, 2 components of the tourism system are the traveler generating region and the tourism destination region, right? And here I go into the explanation as to what these are. So the traveler generating region can be defined as places where trips begin. This region supplies travelers to the tourist destination, and it is where the push or motivation to travel exists. So for example, Jamaica receives a significant number of visitors from the United States of America. In this case, the USA is the traveler generating region, right? So persons come from the United States of America to Jamaica, right? So the United States of America is where tourism is being generated. It is where the motivation for travel begins. It is where the supply of tourism comes from in this case. So the USA, in this case, as I said, is the traveler generating region. The second one that I mentioned is the tourism destination region. And this is where the tourist will end up. So it is the place that he or she is visiting that is the central decision to make the trip. For example, in the case of Americans who leave the USA to visit Jamaica, the tourism destination region in this scenario would be Jamaica. So they leave the USA to visit Jamaica. So their destination would be Jamaica. Right? So those are 2 components of the tourism system. The tourism system also has another component though, but the question asks for 2. For the purpose of your education, I will give you the other component. So here it is. So the third component is called the transit route, right? So this is the intermediate zone. It does not simply represent the short period of travel to reach the destination, right? So it's not just the short period of travel or the 2 hours that you take to travel from, let's say, Jamaica to some parts of the USA, right? It does not only represent that. That is included in it, but it does not only represent that. It also includes intermediate places that may be visited en route to the tourism destination region. So for example, if you are living in, let's use Germany again. If you are living in Germany and you want to visit Jamaica, but you need to travel from Germany to England and then take a flight from England to Jamaica, right? England would be a part of the transit route, okay? So the place that you stop over at is a part of the transit route, not just the journey, right? So make note of those 3 components of the tourism system, and the order in which they appear in the tourism system is the first component is the traveler generating region. That is where the supply is generated. Then you have the transit route, which the people take to reach their destination. And the final one is the tourism destination region. So they are in order. You start at the traveler generating region, You take the transit route to get to your destination. So that is how you can remember these components. Part C says, describe 2 push factors that are associated with travel and tourism. So let us analyze the answer that I have here. It says, push factors can be defined as those factors that compels a person to move from their area of residence. So if you notice there, I defined what push factors are. And if you saw the previous video that I made, if you didn't see the previous video, you can go and have a look at it. You know, whereas I said I spoke about how you can actually maximize your marks by defining terms, using examples and things like that. So here is the application coming out right now. So the push factors, I defined push factors, and then I named the 2 push factors that I'm going to speak about. So push factors can be defined as those factors that compels a person to move from their area of residence, right? 2 push factors that are associated with travel and tourism are the climate of the traveler generating region and the lack of desirable resources in the traveler generating region. And you know, these are only 2 factors, right? There are many other factors that can motivate travel, many other factors. There is no one way to answer these types of questions, right? You have many factors. So you might use 2 other factors, and that's okay. As long as they are appropriate and accurate, that is fine. So let us get into the first push factor. The climate of the traveler generating region can cause residents to leave in an attempt to experience a more desirable atmosphere. This is one of the reasons why tourist arrivals in the Caribbean are higher between the months of December to April, the on-season. That is what you call the tourism on-season. This is when persons travel a lot, right? And lower from May to November. This is the off-season, where tourism is not so booming. During the months of December to April, most regions that usually supply tourists to the Caribbean, such as Europe and North America, are undergoing extremely cold weathers. This pushes residents to vacation in a more tropical climate. So you see, I gave the definition of push factors. I explained I listed the 2 factors that I'm going to state, that I'm going to explain. I explained the factor with an example, right? So let's move on to the second factor. A lack of desirable resources in the traveler generating region can also persuade residents to travel. When tourists come to the Caribbean from places like New York, they tend to gravitate to nature and are interested in a myriad of outdoor activities, some of which are not readily available to them back home, right? So those are 2 push factors that you can list when you're answering this question. Those are not the 2 push factors. They're not the only push factors, but there are 2 that you can consider. Question 2A says, identify 3 key sectors other than visitor attractions within the tourism industry. And you know, sectors within the tourism industry include the transportation sector, food and beverage sector, the accommodation sector, among other sectors, right? But to go in depth in these sectors, you can sign up for the classes, for the tutoring sessions, and then we can take an in-depth review of what these sectors actually entail and go into detail about tourism linkages and all that. But the 3 sectors that I have identified here are the transportation sector, food and beverage sector, and accommodation sector. And I'll say it again, these are not the only sectors. There are many other sectors to consider. Part B says, explain 2 visitor management strategies that are usually implemented by a man-made attraction, right? So what do we do first? We define visitor management strategies. So it says here, visitor management strategies can be described as the methods utilized by tourist destinations to monitor tourism activities in an attempt to achieve sustainable development goals. 2 such strategies are carrying capacity and codes of conduct, all right? So let us go in detail now. According to the World Tourism Organization, carrying capacity refers to the maximum number of people or tourism activity that can be accommodated in or at a destination or site, be it beach, attraction, etc. For example, the carrying capacity of a beach may be 200 persons. This number is the maximum amount of people that the beach can safely accommodate without violating sustainability standards, right? The second strategy is codes of conduct. Now, codes of conduct refers to the standards of behavior that tourists are required to adhere to whenever they visit a destination. For example, the code of conduct for an attraction which offers ATV rides could stipulate that visitors should keep their helmets on at all times while operating the vehicle. So these two strategies are strategies that are used to manage visitor behavior, right? So you can have a look at these strategies and have a look at other strategies as well. These are not the only strategies. As I've kept saying, the answers that are given to this question, there is no one answer, right? There is no one answer to most of these questions, right? But you have to explain, you have to use examples, you have to explain, you have to allow CXC, or the persons marking the K paper, to realize, allow them to realize that you know what you're talking about. Part C says, with specific reference to visitor attractions, explain two current issues affecting the tourism sector, right? So we start by saying two current issues affecting the tourism sector, specifically visitor attractions, are safety and security issues, crime, as well as epidemics and health risks. And an example would be COVID-19 and other health risks, other diseases. So safety and security issues, especially as it relates to crime, has a massive impact on the tourism sector. In recent times, due to the significant rise in the crime rate in Jamaica and the imposition of measures by the Jamaican government, including a state of emergency, countries such as Canada issued warnings to their residents discouraging them from visiting Jamaica and saying that if they do decide to visit, they should remain in their resorts. The crime situation has caused a reduction in the number of visitors as concerns grow, and this reduction has affected attractions negatively as well. So that is one issue affecting the tourism sector. And moving on to the next issue that we said were epidemics and health risks. For example, COVID-19, let's explain that now. So we have seen the major impact that epidemics and health risks can have on the tourism sector since the arrival of COVID-19. Travel to and from most of the world was restricted, and although those restrictions are more relaxed now, things are still not as they were 3 years ago. Attractions are still affected because they can no longer accommodate the same number of people as before due to social distancing guidelines, and their carrying capacity has been reduced significantly. So that is how you go about answering a question like this. And I'll repeat, this is not the only way to answer the question, but this is just an example of how you go about answering a question that is phrased like this. Moving on to the third question. Define the term sustainable tourism and state one example of a sustainable tourism practice for 3 marks. So the answer that I have says, the UNWTO, that's the United Nations World Tourism Organization. You guys should know your organization. So you should know the UNWTO, you should know the Caribbean Tourism Organization, you should know the Jamaica Tourist Board, you should know the organizations that are associated with tourism within the Caribbean. So the UNWTO defines sustainable tourism as tourism that takes full account of its current and future economic, social, and environmental impacts, addressing the needs of visitors, the industry, the environment, and host communities. One example of a sustainable tourism practice is becoming certified by organizations that facilitate these practices, such as Green Globe, right? Part B says, outline 3 reasons why local communities are considered to be an important component of sustainable tourism for 6 marks. So, local communities are considered to be an important component of sustainable tourism because they can help create an environment that is conducive to tourism, provide opportunities for locals to obtain jobs in the sector, and they help regulate the environmental impacts of tourism. right? So firstly now, the first point, the second paragraph says, sustainable tourism seeks to maintain the social well-being of both tourists and locals. Local communities can play a huge role in creating an environment that is conducive to tourism by doing their part in ensuring that the interactions between tourists and locals in the area are positive and minimizing incidents of harassment and hostility so that the tourism product can develop in a healthy way. So there we spoke about the social well-being, the importance of the community to the social well-being, right? The next one we say is that local communities also supply labor to tourism organizations, right? So we're talking about employment now, and that has to do with the economy. So I go further to say, for example, hotel workers or vendors. Many locals are employed within the tourism sector, and that is one of the things that sustainable tourism is all about. When local communities supply labor to these organizations and allow residents to be trained and employed, it further highlights how important local communities are to the industry and vice versa, right? So that is the second one. The third one now says that local communities can help to regulate the environmental impacts of tourism and mitigate the negative ones. In an ideal world where sustainable tourism practices are carried out, locals can be consulted regarding tourism development in their communities. It is through this consultation that they can advise the relevant authorities on what activities are acceptable and what activities would be harmful to the environment, thus allowing for better preservation of local resources. Okay, so if you notice in the question, I used three types of issues to answer the question. I addressed the social well-being, so that's the social issues. I addressed economic well-being, where I spoke about the labor and employment, so that's the economic issues. And I spoke about the environmental well-being, so that is the environmental issues. And these are three things that are heavily focused on in Unit 1 in tourism. You have to know the socio-cultural impacts of tourism, you have to know the environmental impacts of tourism, and you have to know the economic impacts of tourism, right? So these are things that you're required to know, and each impact, each issue can have a positive and a negative impact. So there are positive socio-cultural impacts, there are positive economic impacts, and there are positive environmental impacts, but each of these impacts also have negative consequences. Let us move on. Part C says, explain 2 actions which tourism and hospitality organizations can undertake to strengthen their sustainable tourism practices, right? So let's answer this question. According to Maxwell 2018, sustainable tourism practices are those actions that tourism organizations take in an attempt to preserve resources for the future generation. 2 actions that tourism and hospitality organizations can undertake to strengthen their sustainable tourism practices are becoming certified by an organization that promotes sustainable tourism and embraces community participation, right? So first point, let's speak about the certifications now. So certifications such as Green Globe and Blue Flag can help strengthen the organization's sustainable tourism practices. These certifications are offered to persons who meet a certain standard as it relates to sustainable tourism. An example of an organization that has sought to strengthen its sustainable tourism practices is the Rock House Hotel in Jamaica, which is Green Globe certified. And you have heard me speak about these certifications in the previous video and earlier in this video. And it is important to know about these certifications if you are going to study, especially Unit 1 tourism. And it's important to know about them because of where tourism is going these days. So tourism is taking a turn towards sustainability, so there are a lot of rules and codes that need to be adhered to, and getting certification is one such way in taking the right step in allowing the business to be efficient and to be sustainable and practice sustainable tourism. The next point is embracing community participation, right? And here I say embracing community participation can also aid in strengthening sustainable development practices, as locals will have a say regarding the tourism activities that take place within their community, as well as potential impacts that these activities may have. This will help to ensure that organizations are held accountable for their actions and are properly advised by people with familiarity in the area of operation, thus taking the organization one step closer to achieving its sustainable development goals. For example, there is ongoing community consultation regarding the Winifred Beach development in Portland, Jamaica. And I also mentioned this in the previous video where I outlined the steps that you should take to write these essays. Okay, so those are the questions that we're going to go through today. That's the end of it. I hope that this helped you to better prepare for your exams. And if you want some more help with preparation for tourism and other subjects, you can contact WITS Tutoring. Here is the contact information, and here are the subjects that we offer. We offer CSEC subjects as well as CAPE subjects, and we offer grade 3 and PEP studies as well. So you can subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can follow us on Instagram. You can send us an email at witstutoring@gmail.com, or you can contact us on WhatsApp via this number regarding registration. Thank you so much for watching, and good luck on your exams.